Look, we have some botrytis that started, but we still don't have enough alcohol or enough acid. That's not cool. It will give the wine more largeness. I don't like. You see that Teroldego makes huge grapes. just pick the smallest one ever. The thing is here, first, very simple. I always say that we have three main vinification styles or processes. One is the amphora vinification, which I explained then in the amphora cellar. One is the laser, so the light red we do, so it's 12 hours on the skins. Mostly Teroldego. There is a few red varieties that we have from old vineyards, like Lagrein, Merlot, and we have some Schiava. That also goes into the mix, but it's more of a stylistic vinification. So we do 12 hours on the skins max. So the moment the cab rises, we rack it. And then we press the skins, and obviously the wine of the skins is very dark, so we put it on the side, and sometimes part of it goes into the Foradori, some goes into the Laser, but we have to be careful about the color as well there. And then after this short maceration, it goes wherever we have space. So there's no carbonic maceration, but you know, some stays in steel, some in cement, some goes into amphoras. It depends. It's really, it stays there until February, January, February. So it doesn't really matter too much where it stays. And the third one is what I say the classic vinification we do, which is a pre-World War I vinification, which is the Manzoni, Foradori, and the Granato. So on the Foradori, it's 1 week to 2 weeks of maceration. On the Granato, 10 to 21 days. It always depends on the vintage. And then they go for 1 year the Foradori, and for 1.5 years at least the Granato into big oak barrels, as it's always been done. The Granato ferments in tronco conical beans that I show you, and the Manzoni, the principle is the same, just that the big barrels are acacia and it's only 6 months, and the maceration is between 2 and 4 days depending on the vintage. You know, you have a denser vintage, then you might do less maceration. If the vintage is very crisp and nice and long, you can do longer maceration, so it always depends. But at least 2 days always. So we don't have a direct press. So the grapes are weighted on the weight of my grandfather. So this scale is from 1901, so it's still the same. So you see the thing there? It's a mechanical weight. Then we process them here in the destemmer. The dream destemmer. There is a vibrating table to separate the smaller parts, and it goes down, up, and then there is a second table that sorts out the good berries. So it's actually the first year we use it. Before we only had a horizontal simple destemmer with this table. So there is an added double process, which means an hour longer of cleaning the stuff afterwards. That's all it means to me. But obviously we have an easier way of separate, you know, to make a good destemming of whole berries or to slightly crush them. We have a better decision making on that, and we can have cleaner berries with the sorting tables. Then it goes into the fermentation cellar. So we're either outside here in the cement or in here. In this case you have a, let me get some CO2 out, otherwise you die. Basically the cap is submerged. This stuff. So there is a grid that keeps the cap underneath, so we need to do less punch downs, so we don't extract too much. So we try to keep the Granato more elegant than it used to be. It used to be more extraction, more density, but it was more rustic. On the long run, it took a long time to actually smoothen out. With this process and also with the semi-carbonic on the whole berries, sometimes we're able to lift it up from the beginning, and it also doesn't mean that it ages less, you know what I mean? So it kind of, so the Granato changed a lot, since 2015, I would say. I don't want my brother to kill me because I have to respect his pace. So if he closed it, then I have to close it. Let's go down to the cellar. Once the wine comes down, well, every vineyard is obviously vinified separately, and so every vineyard gets its own vat. So you have basically every container just contains a single vineyard, and which means that for the Granato and for the Foradori, once the year has passed, we assemble the vineyards that we deem most likely. So there is a Bordeaux cut to be made, which is always kind of interesting. By Bordeaux cut, I mean you have to find the balance with the different vineyards because they all keep a very different expression. This also means that we do at least 2 bottlings, and the first bottling and the second bottling tend to be very different. So the first bottling is the first one to come out, so it has to be the readier wine, or at least the ones that are a little bit more ahead in terms of openness. And so it's usually fresher and crunchier, while the second bottling gets all the denser stuff. So even for the Foradori itself, there are 2 different Foradoris, even though it's the same bottle with the same label. On the back, above the alcohol, there is a little point, or 2 points, or no point. And depending on what you have, it means it's if there is no point or 1 point, it means it's the first bottling. If there's like 2 red dots on top, it means that it's the second bottling. So the second bottling usually can withstand, would evolve better. But it's also less crunchy, so right away, if it's the new vintage, and if it's one in the bag, say like, okay, I can leave, but otherwise I would keep it on the side. Because even the entry-level wine should have its time. The cellar is very comfortable. You can smell it. It's very fresh air, and the temperature is super stable because this cellar was built in a time, I think it would be like the architectural golden age, because you still have very massive material, so no shitty cement and stuff like this that deals badly with humidity, because cement and humidity don't like each other. I don't know why the world hasn't understood yet, because we still keep filling everything with cement. At the same time, so it's not as fancy as a carved, and chalk, that is good, but you have also not only good building material, so antique building material, but you also have good engineering ideas in terms of airflow, how deep do you have to go. This is not a very deep cellar, so it means also that you don't really want too much temperature. The temperature has to be stable. It has to be stable, but those 2-3 degrees give also seasonality to the wines. So it's not bad. So if the cold arrives, it's getting a bit colder here. So it's not just climatized. At the same time, it's not so deep because at the time people would die. Like deep cellars meant dead grandparents. Like most vignerons in South Tyrol or in Trentino, if you ask, somebody in the family died in the cellar because you just faint. It's actually a good death. CO2, I'm a bit sleepy, I fall asleep, finito. Because nobody's going to take you out. So they used to go down with a candle in the cellar. So when the candle would go out, they would run. Because it means there's not enough oxygen for you to survive. This is the press, the leftover skin presses of the Manzoni. So actually there's also part of the Manzoni who's done in amphora, which we don't declare, but who cares, it's usually very good. And here, these are the acacia casks for the Manzoni. And here is some more Manzoni presses, and the rest of the Granato 2021. And here we have Giardino, you see, for example, this is classic. Giardino, Fontana Santa, and Lagrange. So this is the leftover. Like obviously every vineyard should go in its own vat, but then once you fill one up and you have a little bit of that vineyard, there is always one barrel that has more things in it, and this is Lézère stuff. So Giardino is the vineyards you've seen here. Fontana Santa is a little plot of Terol that we planted there. It's very small. It's never really wow, it's... and we have an old vineyard of Lagrange that goes into the Lézère, so that's in here as well. So yeah, it's a cellar. I show you the amphora cellar, which is a bit more unusual. So this is the whole team, family team. These are in fact the Dolomite petals. It's a good moment because right now we just filled up most of the amphora. So the Nosiola is mostly upstairs. The Pinot Grigio is already closed. So the first 5 days of fermentation, they only have this, this cloth on top. So we fill them up to here more or less. The fermentation starts obviously spontaneously. And at that point, we do a punch down in the morning, early morning, once a day. And then we just recover it with this, and for 5 days it stays in this state. And then when the fermentation starts to slow down, we close them hermetically with the inox lids, and then we just top them up, and that stays in there for 7 to 9 months, depending on which one. So this is Nosiola. So this is the Nosiola. So see, the punch down would be like this. Just break the cap. So you see some, some are whole berries, some are a bit squashed. It really depends on the vintage how much we differentiate between, keeping the berries intact or actually doing a little bit of, well, we have I don't know how you call this. It's like an ingranaggio, very slight squeeze. It basically goes to like a motor, right? Like 2 keys that slightly squeeze them. Each lid is numbered for each amphora. So each amphora has its own handmade lid. Well, machine-made, but hand. Obviously, it has to fit perfectly. So we are lucky enough that we're in a region where you have a lot of good mechanical production, because this is an area of the world where you produce a lot of car parts for German cars. So that kind of helps. So we're able to do this. At this point, after a while, you just close them and you top it up. So this was topped up in the end, and these were topped up this morning, but they already sucked it down because obviously evaporation is quite intense, and so it consumes wine. So we have a cement vat where we do a week of maceration, and then we fill the Pinot Grigio or the Nosiola or the reds into these Semprepieni, in these inox tanks, and from there we top it up all over the year. And that's it. Then we rack it with a inox cage with the pump in it. We pump them out, we assemble them in cement, they stay there for 3 months just to decant a bit, and then we go into the bottle, usually in July. And then in September the wines are on the market. Well, they're to be picked up then, depending on how quick each country is, they pick them up, and so usually by January they're gone. And so we have space to then bottle the Leser and the Manzoni, and then that is picked up, and then we're ready again for July. So we have a flow that is quite, that is dependent on movement.